This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. A new investigation by the Associated Press reveals how after the attacks of September 11, 2001, the New York City Police Department decided it could no longer trust other agencies to prevent terrorism and started expanding its own intelligence gathering. In the process, it became, quote, one of the nation's most aggressive domestic intelligence agencies, targeting ethnic communities in ways that would run afoul of civil liberties rules if practiced by the federal government. The report, titled "With CIA Help, NYPD Moves Covertly into Muslim Areas," also finds that these operations have, quote, benefited from unprecedented help from the CIA, a partnership that has blurred the line between foreign and domestic spying. Here's an excerpt from the video that accompanies the story.
At this New Brunswick, New Jersey apartment, an alarming scene was found inside Unit 1076. Terrorist literature strewn about and a wealth of computer and surveillance equipment. But this wasn't the command center of a terrorist cell. The materials belonged to a secret team of NYPD intelligence officers, a unit operating miles outside its jurisdiction.
The Associated Press reports details how police used informants known as mosque crawlers to monitor sermons, even without any evidence of wrongdoing. Also falling under NYPD scrutiny were imams, cab drivers, food cart vendors, jobs often done by Muslims. The NYPD did not respond to Democracy Now!'s repeated requests for comment, but its spokesman, Paul Brown, said yesterday the AP story was, quote, marked by outright fiction, unquote, and insisted there's no such thing as mosque crawlers. Brown said, "We're going to do all we reasonably can to keep New York safe, and we uphold the Constitution in doing so." For more, we go to Washington, D.C. to speak with Matt Apuzzo, co-author of the Associated Press investigative report. In New York, we're joined by Ghadir Abbas, a staff attorney with the Council on American Islamic Relations. He's worked on cases of surveillance and government informants across the country. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Matt Apuzzo, why don't you start by just laying out what you found?
Well, as you guys said in the intro, after 9/11, the NYPD really transformed its intelligence division, which before that had been basically a glorified chauffeur service for dignitaries. And they brought in a man named Dave Cohen, who was at one time our nation's top spy. He was the deputy director for operations of the CIA, and also a former New York station chief. And they brought him in he was retired. He brought him in to transform the department. And one of the first things he did was, excuse me, to call down to Langley and say, we need help. And CIA Director George Tenet responded by sending a very veteran, well-respected officer to New York while on the CIA payroll to help really be the architect of the NYPD's new intelligence division collections programs. And as they went, as you guys talked about, the programs really began to kind of mimic some of the CIA's programs. They're very aggressive at building informants, and they have a program that was known as the demographics unit, informally inside the NYPD. The demographics unit, what they would do was they'd take ethnic officers out of the academy and drop them into ethnic neighborhoods where they would basically be the eyes and the ears of the NYPD. They were undercover. They obviously didn't work out of NYPD headquarters. They just were hang out, and so they'd kind of go to the bookstores and the libraries and the hookah bars and the clubs and the cafes and just be the eyes and ears of the NYPD and listen for things that are suspicious. Now, they were also looking for things like, where could you buy a bomb? Where could you buy bomb-making equipment? How could you move money? Those sorts of hot spots. But they were also looking at things that kind of at least brushed up against First Amendment activities. A number of officers mentioned that if somebody was watching television, if Al Jazeera was on television and there was a report about an IED going off in Iraq and somebody at the bar, cheered, that person would would become the subject of a report back to headquarters, and they talk about maybe do we want to drop an informant on that guy and try to get as much information as we can. They also paid, they had 3 tiers of informants. They have seeded informants, S-E-E-D-E-D. These are just, you know, the nosy neighbors, the woman hanging out on the stoop all day, you know, keeping an eye on what's going on in the neighborhood, and she'd provide information. They had directed informants that they could say, go out and gather information on this one topic. They had people they could send out to an event just to be eyes and ears. And they also had a group of informants called, informally, mosque crawlers, whose job it was just to go to the mosques, you know, not always the same mosque, just pop into the mosques and keep an eye open. If there's radical, you know, things being said, report back. But in a number of instances, these mosque crawlers were reporting back on things that it wasn't radical. You know, whether it was running plates in the parking lot or whatnot. So, I mean, it really did. I mean, it really is an aggressive domestic intelligence unit that is a model that we don't see anywhere else in the country. And frankly,
Matt,
part of that is because, yeah.
Matt, I'd like to ask you specifically, one of the things that Cohen had to do to be able to implement this was to get the courts to loosen restrictions on the NYPD surveillance that had been in place since back the abuses that the NYPD committed when it had its old Red Squad, the boss unit that did unprecedented surveillance operations of dissident groups in the United States in the 60s and 70s. Could you talk about what Cohen did there?
Sure. So, as you said, 60s and 70s, they're monitoring political activity. In 1985, there was a federal court order, a consent decree, that basically said the NYPD can't investigate political activity without, you know, specific information that linking it to criminal activity. So you can't just go around, you know, trying to monitor political dissidents or, you know, political activity unless there's a real connection to criminal activity. And what the NYPD said, and in some ways is exactly what the FBI said at the time. You know, look, if we wait for there to be a crime, if we wait for criminal activity, then we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we've waited too long. And we need the ability, those rules can't apply anymore. This is a new day. We need the ability to open our investigations before a crime is committed. And a judge agreed and said that, you know, look, those old guidelines were for an old time. You know, we're in a new time and they need new guidelines. So really loosen the restrictions that dictated when the NYPD could start their investigations, and that really did open the door, you know, to a lot of these programs.
We're going to break and then come back to this discussion. We're talking to the AP reporter Matt Apuzzo, who with Adam Goldman did a fascinating piece about the New York Police Department working with the CIA after 9/11 and questions about what are the laws around the CIA gathering domestic intelligence. And we'll speak with a representative of the Muslim community in New York. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.